Alright, so in this movie I'm going to give more of a spoiler than usual, so be prepared. I want to get to the rating at the end, so probably skip towards the end if you want to not get so much spoilers. But the way this movie is it assumes the perspective of the son in the beginning, who it's going to the end. Oh, it's starting over. It's presuming the perspective of the son, who is a prince, and it basically paints Dracula in a positive light instead of a negative. That said, it's unique in that sense. Normally you don't see that. Now, basically the plot went about the prince trying to save his family, and he comes across this ancient creature that is represented by the dragon in cultures. And for some reason he was forced into hiding. It's not really clear, in my opinion, why he was forced into hiding. He was betrayed. What does that mean, he was betrayed? So it could be there was an arrangement to feed him some food, to give him people, and then that arrangement was crossed. Maybe they violated him with silver and he had to flee, maybe because silver does affect in this movie. It could have been that Christianity came about and that jeopardized his ability to be in the vicinity. It could be a lot of things. Basically, he was forced into a cave. And this dragon creature, basically Dracula's father, is considered Satan. And based on that logic, Satan is basically a personified entity in real life. And the creation was based on him, presumably. It's also the possibility that people called him Satan later on or whatever. That's more of the likelihood. And my mom just distracted me. But really, he's not Satan. He's just this mythical creature that happened to be on Earth. Then he converts Dracula, and he converts this king or prince into the monster Dracula eventually. But it takes a whole movie to get there. So all in all, the Dracula ends up killing his own wife, in a passionate sacrifice to save his son. And her name is Marina, I think, if I'm not mistaken. And it's a nice movie. It's put together well, good plot line. I looked on the reviews, but the reviews did not show favor for some reason. Not 100% sure why. Could have been because it branched off so differently from the mainstream expectation of Dracula being this evil entity and there being no gray area. Another reason why you can see that he's supposed to be perceived positive is because they burned down his house the moment they knew that his tent, that he was a vampire, this mythical creature. Because apparently vampires always existed, but the father of vampires is not really is the one that was considered the greatest glorified creature. So that's how it works. And so, but they treated him negatively when they saw that he was a vampire. They didn't even give him a chance to redeem himself, to explain himself. They didn't see the positive; they only saw the negative. Now, see, it was painted in a very accurate way, considering human nature. Is that throughout history, every time there were vampires, they can't control themselves. So it's logical why they would feel this way. So the director basically craftily constructed a narrative and a portrayal within a sequence of events that gave you the impression that vampires aren't bad. They're just sucked into this world of blood. And it isn't so simple. If you had the will, you could end up being someone like Dracula. So basically Dracula died in the end. And the only reason why he lived is because his servant brought him back to life. But how did he survive? Everyone else died. So the way I understand it is the dragon Dracula, the first evil creature. he had a stronger potency of the curse or the evil or the the magic. And so when it went into the prince, Dracula, he ended up not being as affected by the sun. He was stronger. That's the way I understand it. But according to that logic, then every time someone gets bitten by a previous generation, it should be weaker. And you don't see that impression. So there are some flaws with that logic, but at the same time you can see how it makes sense. But what I like about the tippy end is that they bring in reincarnation. And they set it up for a sequel, even though there's not going to be a sequel because it wasn't an incredibly amazing movie, but it's decent. They set it up so that the father is still alive. Dracula's father, Satan, or the dragon king, or patient zero, whatever you want to call this. So in the beginning, he warned them and said, "There's going to be battles and there's going to be politics, and I know, but you're going to make you're making this decision. I'm not gonna." He chose not to bite him because he wanted the decision. He wanted it to be on him, and that's very Satan-like. Because what does the devil want? It wants you to feel like you're the one making the decision, so that it doesn't take the blame. So obviously, it's always responsible in some shape or form, but that's exactly what the devil does. So it's very accurate in that sense as well. So basically, Dracula finds Mina, and then the movie ends, and she doesn't have any memory of her past life. I think I think Marina was the original name, Mina, or some variation. You have to look it up. And then they go on into date, but the father is watching the whole time. Why does the father have so much interest? So this untold story is probably the precipice for stories of Dracula that take place in the modern age. But it's a reinvigorated version of Dracula. It's a retold story, but the movie tells you it's the untold story. This is the real story, and you can kind of believe it too. The director gave you the ability to understand that appetite is not the fault of the person who's a vampire, of the person who is bloodlusty, who has a craving for violence or death. So if someone has these tendencies, this movie is for you, because it'll kind of make you feel understood. And I wonder what the next movie would be. Would the next movie be the father of Dracula, so to speak, saving, turning his wife, or getting him to turn his wife so they can start a whole empire of elites in this modern age who are blood-sucking monsters? So that sets you up for a possible narrative like that in the modern age. So we had the past age, and then you can have a new movie that takes place in the modern age. So that's interesting. It's not a terrible idea, but I don't think the movie had enough success for a sequel. Maybe it's out, but I don't think so. 2014, it would have came out. I probably would have heard of it by now. There was a Dracula, but it's in the modern era, but it's different series. I have it on my movie list. Now, another thing to ponder is that the son of Dracula, the actual son, dies in a second because he doesn't turn him. So that's like, he becomes like a thought in time, like just a thought. But Dracula lives forever, his story goes on. It's like amazing when you think of it like that Dracula is forever. Unless someone sticks a metal sword in his heart without resuscitation of some kind, or metal stake, or a wooden stake, or some probably chopping off his head could work technically. Definitely if it's silver. or garlic might work, but they didn't mention it. Crosses do work, but imagine someone did something like that, but it didn't happen, and it's probably not going to happen because it has to be stealthy. So it's interesting to consider that the boy dies right away, and then Dracula is forever. It's like the longer Dracula lives, the more meaningless it was to save his son. It's like, yeah, you save your son to have a lifetime as a prince. Good, you love him. That's great. But he's dead now. So that's where the reincarnation comes in. It's like, oh, no one's ever dead. They come back. And sometimes, like in this case, they look exactly alike with the modern hairstyle. And you can find your kids. You can find your family. They're somewhere. Their soul's out there. And that's what Dracula did. He stumbled upon his probably future wife and his ex-wife from the past generations. There was one other point that I thought of that I really want to discuss, but it's not coming to my mind. So it would be interesting to see how things play out, but I'm not that interested. I'm not dying to explore like what might have happened, what will happen, too much. All right, so the rating will be 4 out of 5 and an 8 out of 10. And I'm going to literally pause and just stop here. And the reason why I'm doing this is because so I can edit this out in case I don't decide and have more time to think of what the heck was that other thought. Dracula lives forever, so his son's death is meaningless. It's almost worth turning him, and it makes the plot line of the whole plot line of saving him stupid almost. And you could see the advantages of turning. Are vampires real? We're getting warmer. It's definitely symbolic, but it's not the topic I wanted to discuss. See, what happens is my mom often walks in the background at the worst times possible because I'm basically shooting a video, and then God makes the clouds disperse so we can have better lighting and a better memory because the rays go into the brain. And then that affects the circulation of energy. And then for people who have negative energy, it shakes up, and then the mind starts to say, I need to do this, I need to do that. And then it directs my mother into the background, and it's annoying. I don't like that. But what can you do? Oh, and during this movie, I had the realization that Judas Judas is represented by Dracula, because Dracula's weakness is silver, and who was sold into slavery? Who was sold? Joseph, but who was sold out? The sellout was Judas, selling his brother, selling his leader to the authorities. So silver is like the enemy because it represents. So it could have been that Christian mythology, Christian ideas is what developed the mythology. It's worth investigating. So this basically doesn't follow the magical world in this regard, and it says that it was an evolution. But I would say that that's definitely connected. That he's supposed to represent Judas, and this director would probably be a fan of Judas, probably would understand the complexities of someone who is just outright vicious, and someone's animalistic tendencies coming out is just a product of cause and effect of sequence of events, and pointing fingers at him is just not accurate. It's not the proper outlook. So that's what he was probably doing. Oh, so the last point I wanted to talk about, which was what I forgot, was another thing that happens when the sun comes out is people start riding their motorcycles because they feel more confident and excited. So they just zoom past. They zoom past there. Another thing that happens is people become more emboldened. So that's another reason. And so one of the things they become emboldened is like they raise their sirens more often. They're inspired to do things, whether it's negative or positive. They just have an inspiration. They have energy. So mine's like when the sun comes out, I hear like sirens in the background and motorcycles all over, and I see this on many people's videos. It's because people feel emboldened and energetic, and they want to get it out somehow. So you would think that the sun represents the something that we don't want, and all these people, they're coming out in their motorcycles, like Dracula. He's afraid to go out in the sun. Animals are afraid of the sun, right? So specifically bats are afraid of the sun, or they don't go out in the sun because it's not a good time to get food. Their prey can see them more easily, and their other predators, most likely, be it owls maybe, or hawks for sure, eagles, and a variety of things that are potential threats. So they just don't go out during the day. So that's another reason why. But besides that, nighttime really is something that represents like darkness. And here you have light, and all this annoyances occur. Why is it that people are inspired to be annoying? So that's why it's not so simple as like, this is good, this is bad. Things are used in a good and bad way from all spectrums, from all angles. And the last point that I didn't mention, I was good 2 minutes ago, was the cross. In this movie, the cross is dangerous and deadly. Why? That's a question. And I was thinking about Dracula. If Dracula had the cross on him, would he be affected? In the movie, Silver didn't affect him. Silver did affect him. The cross didn't. The reason that the priest gave was because he didn't solidify, he didn't drink blood at first. So my theory, I have two major theories. One is more likely, but the other also makes sense. One is that Dracula, that the priest is right. Dracula, you're not allowed to drink blood because that means that you've become cannibalistic. You've destroyed all morality or all positive principles in your mind. And so the cross subconsciously or consciously becomes a feared part to you, and it could even affect your DNA. That's one answer. Now that's less likely. The more likely thing is that Dracula is not affected by the cross, because the dragon wasn't affected by the cross. And the proof of this is that they have so many churches, and that's not something that they worry about. The other thing that was interesting is that I almost missed it, unless the lighting was supposed to represent darkness. It was daytime. In the city, it was daytime, which means that Dracula found some way to get protected from the sun. So it could have been they figured out a way using UV rays and sunblock, and they just, it could have been it was a cloudy day, but that's unlikely as well, in my opinion. It could have been New York City represents the devil, right? And so like everything is dark and cloudy. It could have been the fumes, but the most likely thing is a sunblock. But you'll never figure it out unless you look it up and find director cuts or director answers or interviews. Dracula also wasn't covered by anything unless he was under an umbrella, but I don't think that would have a major amount of blockage necessary, even though there are hints that could be done. Another possibility, he built up stamina, but I don't think so. So let's get back to the cross. Why isn't he affected by the cross? So based on other movies, the cross is not bad for you, but only when your heart is affected. I don't think that's likely in this movie. I think it's likely that the cross has no effect whatsoever. It only has effect on new vampires. And that for that answer, you might have to get into like the paradigms and the belief systems of those who already knew about Christianity and believed in it strongly, right? And that lends credibility to the idea that if your principles are strong for Christianity before you die, you will be affected. If not, or the opposite, if you have strong principles but you still fight and don't give up on it, which is only possible if you're if you're Dracula's son, then you won't be affected because you're the patient one. Then you won't be affected as easily or in the same way. And I don't yeah. So he was not affected by the cross, and I don't think he's affected by the cross now. Yeah, so I think it has something to do with paradigm, belief system, and even magical energy from the priests instilling holiness and evil suppression into the atmosphere, type of thing. It could also be that crosses don't have an effect unless the intent is to hurt someone. That's another possibility. I'm sure you can combine them to explain why Dracula was not affected by the cross. Yeah, so I've explored all things I wanted to talk about. There was a nice awkward pause for 20 seconds earlier. Please excuse that. I'm not editing it out. And have a fantastic day. Oh, before I go, let me just talk about other things now that I have you here, because my average time is probably like 20% of my videos. And I think my average time for video watch is like 1 minute per video. And my average amount of time that I make per video is close to 3 to 4 minutes. So people are only watching like 1/4 of my videos tops. So at best, I'm probably going to get a handful of people who have watched a few minutes, and that's it. So it's actually worthwhile to make it longer. What was that point I was going to say? That Dracula, with the awkward pauses, I hope you excuse it. I don't know what I was going to say. Sometimes I wish that this had a recorder like on the phone. That way you can just pause it, and then edit as you do it. But of course, Apple iPhones is not going to be accommodating because they don't like us. Apple wants to make a lot of money and they don't tell us this, but they're just this, snobby company that just wants as much money as they can milk out of their customers. So they won't upgrade the iOS to such an extent that your camera actually works better. And I know they do it because they have panorama now, and they have all these things in your phones that are upgraded. So they could upgrade the software, but they don't do it. They want to buy the next product. They want to make more money. And you would think it would be cracking down, but nope. Apple's money hungry, and money hungry goes into everywhere, Everyone's affected. Hold on, I have to have my secret agents tell me what to say. No, I'm kidding. So like one of the symbologies of Dracula in this movie is the money hungry nature, the bloodlust or money lust of people. And they want to be the most rich and powerful people. And that's why conspiracies are made about people in the elites. They have these scales on their skin and all that. It's because, what is it? It's because they're money hungry, they're animalistic, and so that's why conspiracies are made, because it's so similar. So it's very, very similar why people have these reptile natures. Why reptilians? Why are reptilians ruling the world? Like, where does that idea come from? So the real, true spiritual answer which I'm not supposed to say because it's a movie channel. I just want to make one really long video, obnoxiously long, just to get people to watch more, to see if it works. But I'd say that it's because certain segments of the population are literally animals. They just want to consume and eat. And by eating, I mean make more money. By eating, I mean being violent, watching people bleed, punching the crap out of them. They even want to kill people, so they become assassins. They try to become assassins. They become doctors who get to shoot lethal injections into people sometimes. Places that allow euthanasia, they become people that kill animals. Not always, don't get me wrong. Most doctors are good, but you don't hear the reason why they're becoming doctors. Get into their heads. Mostly, not all doctors, but some doctors, a handful. Obviously, most of them want to make money. And if you want to make money, is that comparable? You want more, you gotta have more. So they're similar. So the nature of appetite is you want more and more. And in Dracula, we find that yes, Dracula does want more and more. Because the nature of the bloodlust wants more and more. So it's comparable. But it's not the exact same. Because money, people wanting more money, I think most people, has more to do with security. Yes, the power comes afterwards, but the origin is security. For people who are bloodlusts, if they want more money, it's for the sake of power and dominance. So in general, money will lead to a desire for more power, but the desire for double money, usually it's birthing takes place from a desire to simply have money. It's completely independent of anything logical, except the belief that this means they won't go hungry and die on the streets. And someone who's animalistic does not believe they're going to go hungry and die in the streets. It's built into the DNA of animals that when you get hungry, you go out and eat. And hoarding food is more for like animals that hibernate, maybe like squirrels. There are cases of certain animals like storing carcasses, and they'll gnaw on like the fats and the bones to get whatever's left a few months down the line in case they can't find a meal. But that's like a last resort. That's like a backup thing. But initially, you get hungry, you go out and hunt. You go out, you're tired, you sleep. It's a very basic, intuitive, instinctive world of thinking. And that's what Dracula was about. It's instinctive. The power is part of the instincts. Because if you're the most powerful animal, you're the least likely to die. And if you have the most money, you are least likely to go hungry. So the desire for power is the offensive, is the pseudo masculine, I guess, I guess pseudo masculine, and the desire for money is the pseudo feminine. You desire money because you want to secure yourself. That's from a defensive feminine standpoint. The desire for offensive dominance or power is the offensive masculine, and they're both in all creature psyches in different potencies. And I guess the ones that are more offensive, more power, the ones on top of the food chain are considered masculine. So that's why lions would be considered masculine, and that's probably why they grew a beard too. How do lions have a beard? It doesn't make any sense. So the answer is that lions, goats have a beard too. One of the few animals that have beards are lions and goats. But, which is interesting because in mythology, goats are the devil, the wise old devil, right? And lions are represented by something like Jesus or Messiah or, right, the line of David is the line of Judah. or God himself. You know, like you have lions at people's houses because it represents like royalty or godliness. Royalty and godliness is an ancient comparison. But it's interesting. I never thought of them. Now that we're talking about Dracula, it's important to talk about different mythologies and the reasons why they come about. But but it's rare to have beards in the animal kingdom, and the reason why this is very important. The reason why animals have beards sometimes is because those animals had the luxury to stop hunting. So goats, for example. I mean, you can test this hypothesis. I'm just saying this because I think this is true. I could be wrong, but I think I'm right. Obviously, the goat. What does a goat do? Usually, it climbs mountains. It's like they're so incredible. They can climb the steepest mountains because they find little crevices, and they have all this muscle in their little hooves and feet to just climb up a mountain as if they're supernatural. You know, like in the movie. What was that movie with Bruce Willis? The third installment. The Beast, right? The Beast was able to because goats have an incredible talent to do that. And what was the other thing? So they can find their food anywhere because they can go anywhere. They can escape anywhere. I've seen like leopards chasing or something like that, leopards or bobcats or all these different cats chasing goats, and they evade them. They're not on the top of the food chain, but they're experts at the elusivity. And what do they eat? They eat grass. So they literally climb a mountain that no one can see, and they start eating the grass on the mountain. That's unbelievable. But the point is, they're the top of the food chain in terms of not dying. So the goat is like the feminine, and the lion is like the masculine. It's the top of the food chain in terms of not of power. They're not going to die because no one's going to overpower them. So obviously, you get a pack of anyone, whether it be wolves or hyenas or any kind of carnivore, they can topple a lion, but it's not going to happen in droves. You're not going to have a pack of hyenas killing off a pack of lions. The muscle mass is just not there. Which is why in the movie Lion King, muscle mass was not the exaggerated portrayal of the lions. And what's interesting is Scar represents the evil one, but no, he represents the feminine, the darkness. Not the feminine is darkness, but that in terms of the parallel of how things are. He wasn't a vegetarian. He was more on the defensive. Like he couldn't overtake Simba. He couldn't overtake Simba. He died. He was depicted as the scrawny one. Obviously, it's because he couldn't hunt well. He wasn't such a good hunter, so he was conniving and cunning. So that's often why the feminist is perceived as conniving and cunning. And from that perspective, you can even say that the bats in Dracula are feminine. Which is interesting because you don't see bats having any gender qualities whatsoever. You rarely see them in cartoons. You rarely see any portrayals of bats whatsoever in any particular light. Except maybe masculine because Batman, right? They're dark, they're scary, they're spooky. Don't mess with them. It's masculine. But really, they're gender neutral. But you see that bats more often than not are portrayed as the masculine for some reason, and that's because the masculine and the feminine kind of coincide. They kind of overlap with each other. I'm just thinking. Those mountains. So that's my theory that the ones with the ones who are on top of the food chain in any regard, whether it's being dominance or defense, they will have a beard because they will have wisdom. It will show that that wisdom got them to where they are, and it's symbolic. But it's also a symbol of when you're on the top of something, you now don't have to worry about survival, and wisdom comes about. So lions actually, the negative thing about lions, goats not so much, is that lions are lazy because there's so much on top that they're lazy. But the problem with laziness is that
you become vulnerable to attack if you lower your guard. I don't think goats become as vulnerable because of the elusivity, but if they're in a field, they're gonna probably get killed. If they're by the mountains or somewhere that they can escape more readily, a lot of these species of goats are very good at escaping. So wisdom is very connected. So the thing is, some animals are theorized, like mice, to require a certain cunning nature. Meaning, the moment mice feel like they'll have as much food as they can get, they become depressed. And lions don't become depressed even if they have tons of food. Well, partially it's because food is a rare commodity in the jungle, in the Africa, in the Amazon, in the wild. It's not easy to come by food. It isn't easy to hunt. Even if you're the fastest and strongest predator, it just raises the probability, but it still requires a lot of effort, and there's still a level of unpredictability where you have to keep yourself on your toes. You don't know if there's going to be a famine. You don't know where's the more, they have to use really good instincts to know where there's more likelihood to find prey. The lions, that is. And as a result, the lions, I think that's one of the reasons why lions don't get depressed. But let's say they were fed tons of food. There was no hunt. Then they would get, my theory, based on the mice experiment, to show that if they have tons of food, they'll get depressed, miserly, and die. And they won't produce offspring. Possibly will even be sterile. But it shows you that the drive is important. But my speculation is that the lion develops wisdom by not worrying too much. I mean, if you don't worry too much, you got wisdom. You might think that under stress you can think so much better. No. You can probably think of quick ways to get yourself out of that circumstance, like running. That's what goats do, But you're not gonna, or attacking, but you're not going to have wisdom off of fear. You're gonna have wisdom. You're gonna have wisdom from the extra time you have. And one of the ways the mind is developing wisdom is it's trying to think of ways to conserve its current survival. So for a lion, it probably has to do with eating all the small predators, or maybe the opposite, maybe eating off the predators that are right beneath them in strength. So based on this theory, they might be eating bobcats. I don't know about that. They're probably smart enough to evade each other. But I know that when it comes to carnivores or slower creatures, they eat those more. But based on this speculation, they would probably want to be away from any predators that would be stealing their food. But this idea is saying that they're going to think they're going to think better in terms of their survival because they have free time. And the reason why the rats in the rat experiment or the mice experiment didn't have intelligence, because it was one generation, they didn't reproduce, and B, it was too fast. When evolution has enough time to let it seep in that you have all this power, you have all this position, then wisdom starts to flow. So there's give yourself time, but there's also the idea that you don't just want time, you want pressure. If you have it 100% well, there's pressure. You have to have some landscape, some survival system that's other than protecting and hoarding your assets, your money, your seeds, your grain, your meat. It has to be something that's a little more complex. So what adds to the complexity of a lion, for example, is that they still have to protect, while they're protecting their food, they still have to protect against the hyenas stealing it, or the vultures coming down and taking their meal. Meaning they have to keep themselves alert, and that alertness is the intelligence. The alertness is the ingredient for intelligence. Meaning you have to be on the top of the food chain to have more time to let your mind sit and think of better ways to protect yourself. But you also have to have a little bit of pressure, And it's that nuance. No, it's that doubt. It's that uncertainties is the best word here, is what actually stimulates your mind to have the best. It's what creates the best duo combination for your mind. If you get that, meaning if you have the uncertainty principle, and you have the top of the food chain phenomenon. But if those two are in play simultaneously, you'll become wise. Because if you kept on your toes, you get bored, then you get depressed because you're not doing anything. You have no purpose. But if you still have that survival aspect of I'm still growing, I'm still doing something, then you'll be a lot better. And so another example of depressed animals could probably be tigers who are domesticated and they don't have enough room to run around. They don't feel like they're in the wild. So my extrapolation on that is that they're not hunting. And another thing is that they had sharks that were put in. Almost all white sharks die in the tank. Some think it's because of some algae. Some think it's because of whatever. They're trying to speculate. They're trying to figure it out. But the reason is because they die of will, a lack of will. They die of depression. Why are they depressed? Because they don't have a hunt. They don't feel like fish. They don't feel like real animals anymore. They want to charge and rip to shreds those fleeing groups of plankton or I don't know what those are called. When you have a ball of fish that are like millions of them in swarms. They want to chase swarms. And that's how they live. They want to feel the hunt. It's built into their heart and DNA, their body, their instincts. And many animals are like this. If they don't have the hunt, they don't have the will. And part of that is from my ingredient 2 for proper survival, for proper genetic evolution. Because you got to have not just the hunt, because the hunt is an offshoot of the source. The source is you got to have uncertainty. So according to this theory, if the sharks in the aquarium were deprived and starved, and they were teased, according to this theory, and obviously I don't recommend you trying this because it might be considered animal cruelty, PETA will be up your ass, but I would tease them with meat once a month, just to give them that sense like, you're stealing my food. And that will actually pump their heart rate and blood so that there'll be some kind of survival system. So you'll take a mechanical meat, you'll lower it into the aquarium or whatever, and the second they come, you raise it up. And after a few times, they'll get better at it. And maybe and they'll be good at it, and that'll help them for a few months. So what you do is you upgrade the software of the mechanical system, and you make it go faster and faster, and that way the shark will always increase his endurance like a regular animal in the wild who learns from mistakes and who gets cut up in the process. But if you have that sense of urgency and hunt and uncertainty, it will be the first principle for their welfare and also biological evolution. So there's the uncertainty aspect, and then the second aspect we said is to have time to think, to have time to figure out better ways to sustain its survival. What a fish might end up doing is breaking the machine, thinking that the machine is the problem. Another thing the shark might do is he might try to kill the owner of the aquarium. No matter how trained he is, he might try to do that because if he has enough time to think, he'll do that. Another thing the shark might want to do is so this can explain why whales and other animals go rogue. So they get annoyed. So it's because they've been sitting around all day, but they have no will. And so they want to up their will. They want to eliminate threats. And the threat might be perceived. They're in a bad mood. They might be perceived as the owner. And so the way to get around this might be to give them other ways to feel like they're outsmarting. Like the reason why killer whales, they don't do well. They go rogue is because you got to find another way for them to feel like they're outsmarting the system. So yes, it's so fun and dandy to give them fish every time, and I'm sure you have a bunch of them that can survive a lifelong like that, but they're more feminine. The more masculine species, I would say, masculine metaphorically, I don't know if both genders act the same, is if one of the animals, the more masculine species will take advantage and try to hurt the owner
if it believes that the owner at doing so would increase the chances of its survival. So if you were to create some kind of competitive system elsewhere, maybe even having 2 killer whales in the tank, that might diminish the chances. You have to look it up. If 2 killer whales cause more bloodshed than 1 killer whale in the tank, I would think no. Also, you have to factor in if one's male, if one's female, it may want to impress the female, may not want to kill it. If it's 2 males, it might increase the chances. Something to look into. Sometimes whales may have an attraction towards their owners, so that may inspire them to not kill them or kill them depending on the circumstance. But these are things to look into it before taking animals into training. I would say that if you do have this system, especially for more masculine animals, it will satisfy a certain need and preoccupy their mind and help it separate that from the animal trainers. And that way the animal trainers will be able to help you out. Will be able to sustain the growth of the welfare of the animal. So there are different goals that you want to have. Are you trying to sustain their biological evolution, trying to sustain their biological welfare? So this is all of the above. These are principles or factors you should be considering all across the board for probably all animals, but more study is needed. And survival is a bloody game, so trial and error should be. It's not like these two principles, if you follow them, you'll for sure have a successful animal park. And these are just these are just guidelines, because you don't know the long-term effects of all these things. It could be that they'll want to outsmart the system that's already in place and decide to kill the owner because, hey, the owner is the owner is they might reason that the owner is the enemy. So don't think that this will solve all your problems, but it's a good foundation. So to come full circle, I'd say that Dracula is for sure a good 4.2 out of 5. I said 4 in the beginning. Now I'm saying it's a 4.2. And out of 10, we'll say it's an 8.1. We can round it to an 8.2 as well. And we'll stop here.